Welcome everybody to a shot at Business Central and a beers holiday special. I guess maybe I should probably refer to it as a shot at Business Central and a glass of wine, but more on that later. On today's show, we have a very special guest who is from Triangle Package Machinery Company, your single source for packaging equipment. Welcome, Mr. Jim Gio, to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Great.
Or should we say welcome back to the show, our first ever repeat guest on the show. Happy to have you here, and in honor of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's, I didn't realize, I guess you are the first repeat guest. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Nice.
and in honor of Jim and his drink of choice, we're enjoying a fine bottle of wine today. So we are off the rails. Michael and I are out of our league.
Yes.
We are over our skis, whatever you want to say. But so far we are enjoying. We got a nice bottle here of Nickel and Nickel Cabernet. Which, and like I said, we've just been kind of getting set up here, and Jim is telling us how much we don't know about wine. So welcome, Jim.
Well,
Glad to have
thank
you
you.
back.
Thank you. Well, that's quite the intro, but thank you very much, and thanks for having me again.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's important to stress how little we know about wine and how much I guess Jim knows compared to us. So
And I know very little compared to most. So
but you've actually had this nickel before, right?
yes, a very good friend of mine introduced me to it years ago, and it's been a very fun ride ever since then because it's a phenomenal bottle. And then every time I think I've peaked, he says, "Oh, here's another bottle I want you to try." And it just keeps moving the bar up for me.
Yes, you keep
So
going. So eventually this isn't going to be a good bottle of wine.
it'll always be a
Right?
good bottle.
So so for those of you maybe that know even less than me, there's two types of wine, really, right? There's white and red.
Yes.
But within red, right, this is a Cabernet, and Cabernet would be one of the, I guess, heavier would be the term.
It's one of the varietals, yeah.
Reds
Grape.
versus a Merlot or Pinot Noir,
Yes.
right, or one of those. Yeah.
I have to say I'm used to wine. My Uncle Sam makes wine, and when he brings over wine, it always has peaches in it. And I guess I never actually asked why. I'm assuming it's just because it's so strong and whatever that this maybe takes out the bitterness or whatever.
Like a sweet wine.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's red or white, it always has peaches in it. So that's what I'm used to. So this is a lot different than than anything
Does
else.
sound homemade.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, homemade wine.
Yeah, no, this is delicious. So good to have Jim here again. Michael mentioned from Triangle Package Machinery. So I was kind of just doing a little research. So making a company designs and delivers and maintains packaging machines. Anything from, I'm seeing some of the new stuff like liquid products to dry fill products, like a big story about dry milk, right? Companies that are putting dry milk into bags and providing that to food banks.
Yeah.
Right.
Been,
Article on that.
been around for how long?
97 years.
97 years.
Yeah.
Chicagoland area.
Yes, all time.
Absolutely amazing.
Family owned, third generation business.
Yes, family still actively works in the company every day. Take a lot of pride in what they do, and they know that there's a value to our customers with that involvement and with that personal care that they put into this. So
It's just so rare though.
Oh, yeah.
97 years, 3 generations. I mean, you hear about it every now and then, but it's very rare, and especially to be in the same sort of area.
Yeah,
It's
it
amazing.
is, especially because I mean you have to be able to do something and do it well, but then you also have to adapt, right?
Yes.
I mean, like, we had customers literally, I mean, they were like typewriter supply distributors,
Right.
right? They're gone, right?
Right.
They just kept distributing typewriter supplies until no one was calling them anymore.
Yeah.
So same thing, I'm sure, in technology, right? There's probably, if you look at a packaging machine that was put together even 20 years ago, compared to the technology that's probably there today, right? And the efficiency and speed of it, R&D is probably a big part of the business.
It's a huge part of our business, and having to constantly evolve is what keeps us relevant, and changing with our customers' ever-changing needs really is a challenge, but it's something that I think having that having that involvement from the ownership, and making sure that we stay current and having those personal relationships with the companies that we have them with keeps us relevant, and keeps us moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the top, so today, Jim's going to be with us throughout the show today. We're going to kick it off next with our shot of Business Central. Then after that, we're going to spend some time talking to Jim about Triangle. And specifically, we're going to talk kind of center around probably 2 or 3 topics. One is the use of Business Central jobs and manufacturing, which is kind of a combination there of how can these work, how do these work together for an engineering to order type firm. Number second, we're going to talk about Business Central online versus Business Central on premise. And Jim is going to share with us some of his thoughts and ideas about, their plans, or maybe no plans, I don't know, to go, to the online version. And then lastly, we're going to talk just a little bit about the supply chain, how that may be impacting Triangle's business, and then what things maybe they've been doing inside Business Central to help minimize the impact of any supply chain disruptions. So, and then, that'll wrap that up with Jim, and then we're going to close it out. Michael has recently written a really nice blog article on the Business Central online service and scalability in terms of talking about big companies versus small companies running Business Central, and how does Microsoft manage that, right? The different resources.
We've got some numbers for you, so.
Yeah. So stay tuned. We got a lot of good information coming your way.
Time for the shot segment of A Shot at Business Central on a Beer. And we've got some news for you today. I'm not going to say if it's a lot or a little bit of news, but we've got some news for you today.
Really? All right.
I had to throw that in there.
Very good. Very good.
Ken's going to start out with talking about the BC update 19.1.
Yeah, let's actually start at 19.0, right? 2021 Wave 2, right? Scheduled to be released in October. Actually started rolling out probably mid-November-ish. So it was a little bit late rolling out. And now version 19.1 is also out. So if your environment was updated successfully to 19.0, you actually by now are probably running 19.1. And which 19.1, there's several fixes. So there's 14 platform fixes, 88 application fixes, and actually 5 US localization fixes included in there, including, I believe, one that may be 1099 related. So there's definitely some updates in there. And also there are feature updates
Which
included.
is surprising.
Yeah.
Right, because after a major release, you would think that the next monthly update would just be fixes and
although usually, if you look at the release notes for like 2021 Wave 2, coming out in October, you will see that there are actually certain features that are scheduled to be released over the next 6 months.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's every feature that's coming out with those major releases is not necessarily deployed that month. So there are a few. So for example, in the 19.1, the new feature to copy environments of different types is included. So in the admin center, you can copy one production environment to another production environment, or a sandbox to another sandbox, or a sandbox to production, right?
That's huge.
Before you could only do, I think, a production to a sandbox.
That's becoming more and more of a need with all the different apps and everything having to test before major releases, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. There's some operations log enhancements where they're doing some better job of logging activities in the system. There's a new tool in the admin center that now allows you to restart environments. So if something happens and you just want to restart your BC, one of your environments, there's actually a tool now in the admin center to allow you to do that. Now there's support for 2D barcode printing. So there's a couple new fonts that are included in the service that allows you to do 2D barcode printing. Previously,
Nice.
you would need an app, right, to do that. And then kind of a cool little needed little feature is that the shipping agent information from the sales orders, things, so you're like, is this UPS ground or
Mhm.
FedEx next day, right? So the shipping agent and shipping agent service fields are copied from the sales orders to the warehouse shipment records. And this is meaningful because a lot of times that warehouse shipment document gets printed in the warehouse and they need to know how is this going to get shipped, because that's going to change how they actually pick it and prepare it for shipment to go out the door. So that's something that's new in there as well. And then there's a couple, good to know things out there as part of 19.1. Just as a reminder, there was a Business Central launch event on all these new features and functionality that's available out there now. There's 15 sessions that talk about all these new features that are coming out,
Wow.
as well as also over 100 Business Central customer stories that they've published
Oh, really?
out on the Microsoft site. Yeah, so kind of some reference stories if companies are, maybe they're looking at Business Central and they're interested in it, they want to see what other companies are doing with it.
Nice.
There's over 100 customer stories that they've put out there. So quite a bit for a
19.1.
19.1 update.
Yeah, definitely quite a bit. I've got some other little random news pieces. So, did you know that if you're using Business Central Cloud, I guess, and you're in the web browser, you can actually install the app now just from clicking the install app option on the URL part.
Didn't know
So that's
that.
something new. Also, there's now over 2,000 Business Central apps on app stores. So round of
Hey,
applause.
it's a 2,000
2,000,
mark.
big mark, yeah. January's update will include a new email address lookup feature. Everybody's going to love that. What I'll do with that is I actually have a video of it. I will link to that in the show notes. In preview right now, Business Central now has documentation on AL error and warnings and links directly to that from the AL compiler messages. This is all Greek to me, as they say, that part. Let's see what else. You can find all Business Central and Power BI integration documentation in one place. We'll include the link in the show notes. And last but definitely not least, there are some new telemetry items coming into 2022 Release Wave 1 updates. You'll be able to see database deadlocks, database weight statistics, general error dialogues, permission error dialogues, and use of read scale out in web service calls. So I think we blasted through that pretty fast. Kind of keep Jim awake.
Yeah. Yep. Last thing I just wanted to mention is just a reminder. Last month, we talked about some changes that are coming up for BC Online for 2020 and 2022 regarding the contract and the monthly payments for Business Central subscriptions, right? So I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but if you want to continue with the flexibility to go month to month on your payments, expect a price increase on the subscription fee. Otherwise, you can go into agree to an annual term to lock in the current prices.
It's all part of the new commerce experience. All right, what are we talking about next? We're going to be talking more with Mr. Jim Gio, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody, stick around. All right, we're back here and we're lucky to have Mr. Jim Gio back in the office with us once again. Last time Jim was here was 2 years ago for our first and only holiday podcast. And as Jim brought up, he was our first guest on A Shot of Business Central and a Beer. So welcome back, Jim.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, for the listeners who didn't listen to the first episode a couple years ago, can you maybe tell us a little bit about who you are again and you know, the company that you work for?
Of course. So obviously my name is Jim Gio. I've been in technology industry for over 25 years. I've been at my current company for about 6 years. And I've been working with SSI for, over 10. So the company that I work at right now is Triangle Package Machinery Company. We've been around for over 95 years, close to 97 years, making packaging machines, primarily in the food service industry. It's a family-run company here in Chicago. We've been here the whole time. And I came on board with them about 6 years ago with the goal of implementing a new ERP system. And as Ken can tell you, Nav was not even on their radar as the solution that they were picking. They had picked out a few other solutions. And when I came on board and was meeting with them, I had said, have you guys ever looked at this particular product? No one had ever heard of, at the time, Nav, now Business Central. And they were like, no, but they were actually going to use it as just a comparison tool to prove that the ERP system they were going with was the right choice. And after looking at Nav, after Ken had done his demonstration and really just sort of working through the demos and everything like that, it became clear that Nav wasn't really the option, just to prove that our other system was right. It actually buried the other system and became the clear choice of which one to go with. So it's a testament to the program, but also, our relationship with SSI and just, how working with you guys was good for a company like ours.
Yeah, you can't really beat Nav and Business Central, right?
Yeah.
So, and now you do I think what is your official title? Director of Information Technology?
Director of Management Information Systems.
Management Information, yeah. So what do you think about all the ransomware going around in this world?
It's very scary. I don't think that there's, any end to it in sight, but I think there's a lot of things that you can do to prevent it.
Yeah.
Simple little Microsoft things like like multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Very simple thing that you can do to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the different, I guess, pieces of the business. So what drives the revenue or the sales? What are the different components of sales and things that you're doing for your customers?
So I think we would actually be divided up into 3 core sections. We have our new machine sales. We have our service, which would be the servicing of the machines that we've sold. And then we have our aftermarket parts and accessories. So you have an existing machine of ours, you want to retrofit, different parts onto it or modernize it to do these new requirements. So we have the capability of doing that. So those are the 3 core areas of our business. And then we utilize Nav in those ways. We have jobs for that, which is something I think we're going to be diving into, to manage the project management of those. Prior to having Business Central in the building, we really didn't know how a lot of that was being tracked. We knew the cost of production, but we didn't actually know a lot of the administrative costs that went behind the scenes, the research and development costs, the engineering costs, just the general project management costs. And we had the production orders to tell us what it cost us to make it. We had the purchase orders to tell us what we paid for components that we had purchased and, subcontracted work that we had done, but we really didn't know what that administrative cost was. And now Jobs has really been able to identify that for us. And for a company like ours, that's really how we're going to move into the future, is understanding those costs and understanding that, what do we need to do? Who do we need to bring on to look at these different areas and put more resources in R&D or put more resources in, project management to keep these things moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's, so to kind of circle back to a couple of things you just said, which was, right, you've got these different lines of business. One is you're building these relatively complex machines that can take months to build.
Yes.
You're distributing replacement parts or supply, or right, maybe some small parts for existing customers. You're also having to do service.
Yes.
On-site service or repair or maintenance, right? And a lot of times, like, we hear our clients tell us that, well, this system was really good at this. The system was really good at that. But I think Business Central has components, right? And the ability to handle all those things. And you're actually using multiple of them together. Yeah. So like a customer, right, places a new order for 3 new packaging machines. that is a job,
Yes.
right? And you have to do engineering,
Yes,
right, an engineer to order, or right, to ETO type model.
exactly.
You've got to do a bunch of engineering for some of the components maybe on these machines. You've got other internal costs that you may need to track.
Mhm.
But then you're gonna kick off, you're gonna kick off some production orders
Yes,
onto the manufacturing shop floor, and do your traditional manufacturing, I'm using air quotes,
of course.
traditional manufacturing type operations, right? And those pieces kind of work together, right, to create that solution.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that most companies like mine look at is just that production cost, because that's really what they view as like the tangible cost. It's like, okay, what did, how many did we make? What were the labor hours involved with it? And you don't really, you sort of look at the office staff, your engineers and people like that as just part of your overhead. And really, it does go into the cost of that machine, and what future revenue you can realize off of it. So I think that having that visibility is a huge factor for us, and it's something that I don't think we were mindful of previously, and I think now it's definitely a hot topic for us.
You know the benefit.
Yes.
So a question to Ken, actually, how common is it for companies to actually use, let's say, jobs and manufacturing together? Is that common?
Yeah, it is. In this engineer to order model where you're building a machine, let's say, right, or some sort of device that's going to be tailored for a client, it's actually real pretty common, right? Yeah, because and part of it has to do not just with the operational side of the business, but it's the sales side too. So meaning, right, I get a customer, they want this machine, but they want me to do this customization to it and add this custom component or whatever to it, right? Well, I'm not gonna explicitly break down a price for all these different things I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna tell them, look, I'm gonna charge you $250,000 for this. And that's gonna include everything we just talked about here. And I'm gonna charge you today, I'm gonna send you an invoice for $100,000 as a deposit. And you're gonna pay that invoice. But I can't recognize revenue yet, right? So I need to track that as like deferred revenue. So that's where jobs comes into play. The fact that, so it has to do also not just with the operational side, but your billing and your revenue recognition and cost recognition and how that flows to your financials. So that's really important for these types of models, so because they cross over multiple months, right?
Okay.
It's not like I'm going to take a job and it's going to be over in 3 days.
Right.
You don't need really jobs in that case because it's all typically happening in one period. But when you're building a $500,000 machine or whatever it is, right, with all this custom engineering work, that's going to take maybe 3 months or 6 months, or right.
And to Ken's point, so one of the things that we actually use jobs for at the end of every project is to do a cost of goods sold review. So we'll go through the project as a whole. So it's multi-machine, single or multi. You'll go through and you'll look through all of those costs. And this is data that we did not have previously. And just the amount of information that you can glean out of that is just so valuable to the company. It also lets you know for future projects, like, was this a worthwhile project to do? Because you start to look at it and say, okay, here's the unknowns that we went into this project with, and here's the amount of engineering that took to do that particular project. Is it worth it for us and the customer to go forward on a project like this? So it's information you didn't have previously, that really is invaluable when you think about it, in maintaining your business. So those COGS meetings that we do at the end of every order wrap up really give us that view of that. And jobs module definitely gives us that visibility that we'd never had before.
That's so interesting to hear you say that, because one of the things that companies tend to struggle with is that closeout, that wrap up. And it's not, they just don't do it, it seems. And now that I hear you say that, it's because you didn't have the data before. Right? There was nothing to really analyze because you didn't really have anything to track. But now I think that is important at the end. All right, hey, we're done with this. Let's have some sort of a recap at the end and see what we did. But you just made me realize why that isn't typically a standard part of their process. It's because they just never had the information to do it. There was really nothing to review.
Right. And now you have this wealth, and that's really, well, if you take, Business Central as a whole, whether it's the JAWS module, whether it's, the manufacturing module, all of it together, it's, for a company like mine, it's information we never had before. We didn't know what we didn't know. And now you're taking that information about your manufacturing, you're taking that information about your administrative costs and all of those things, and you're tying it all up. And now we're letting our financial team take that information and audit it like they should be doing, and giving us value added information out of it. So I think that's really where Business Central shines in all aspects of it. And I think the JAWS module really brings it all full circle, because like I said before, everyone focuses on the manufacturing, and it's very easy things to do. How much did it cost us to make it? How much did it cost me to buy it? We didn't know how much it cost me to design it though, or to manage this project, or to redesign it. Or you know what, we had these two components already that we designed, but they never went together. So now what is it going to cost me to engineer those two pieces together to make this new request? So that's really where I think Business Central as a whole, with all of these different components that it has to it, can be a very invaluable tool for what you're trying to do and understand what you're doing as business.
So I bet once you guys had all that information available to you, when you switched over to Nav or whatnot, it might have been a little bit nerve wracking, right? Because you're seeing the good and the bad then at that point, right?
Oh yeah.
But in the long term, it's good because you can fix the bad, but.
One of the very funny things is when we first started the implementation, one of the things I had stressed to everybody is, we're going to uncover a lot of our dirty secrets that we didn't even know about ourselves.
Right.
There's things that we just didn't even realize, and it's going to be scary, but you just need to own it. We've just got to fix this.
Exactly.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that's one of the good things about Business Central, is that it's going to tell you what you didn't know about yourself. And I think that it's a very scary realization, because you walk into it thinking you're an expert. I know everything about us. And Business Central lets you when you, any ERP system that's properly implemented and that you're using properly, is going to let you know you didn't know as much as you thought you knew.
Grounds you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's very humbling, I think. And
we've had instances where it's like, hey, look, with jobs, we can now budget engineering hours and track actual engineering hours. And sometimes the engineering manager is in the room and goes, yeah, we're not going to do that to start. maybe phase 2, we'll get to that. Like,
Doesn't want anybody to
I
know.
think I understand
Yeah.
what's happening here. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, so now you've got these long, right? You're manufacturing internally a lot of components that are being used to produce these machines. So some raw materials, and then probably some purchased parts as well that go into there. Obviously, in the last year, in the US, and I think worldwide, there have been supply chain disruptions. Has that impacted your business? And if so, how have you maybe used Business Central to help minimize those?
So as everybody that's, living in the world right now, we are dealing with that. Business Central has been a very valuable tool. It unfortunately doesn't unpack cargo ships or ship things. It's something that, I think.
Not yet.
In the future.
Say if you can get a module that does that, I'd really appreciate it. But what it has helped us as a company do is identify our inventory turns and what components we actually need, and what our higher volume items are that have more frequent inventory turns, so that we should have them in stock. So what we've been able to do is use that data and look at, okay, here's what we have in the pipeline. Here's what our average consumption is. You know what? Because there's longer lead times on these things, we should place larger orders now for them so that we can better service our customers. So we're trying to get in front of it. And instead of doing just a blind order everything, we have this on the shelves right now, just get a ton of it. That's not really a good use of our resources or our funding. So really what we decided to do is utilize Business Central to say, okay, these are your high turnover items, these are longer lead time items. Identify the ones that we can't get from multiple locations, and then really make an informed decision on, okay, we should order a lot of this, or, more than we usually order, just so that we have that in stock so that we can better service our customers. Because it's not only the manufacturing of the machine, because really it's easy to look at, oh, we're going to sell this many next year, we should have this many in stock. It's that information that we've been able to get out of Business Central that tells us, okay, but you consume about this many for service orders, you consume about this many for aftermarket orders. Those are things that sort of get lost because those are, I'm not gonna say they're impulsive sales because they're not impulsive sales, but a machine, when you're buying a, very expensive bagging machine, or, any of our larger machines, it's something that you've planned for. This is a, capital expense that you've forecast. With the pandemic and other things like that, there were retooling that needed to happen on some machines. People didn't plan for that. So this was something that was more reactionary. So we needed to make sure that we, looked at that data and, okay, over the last 5 years, looking at those types of sales, what types of components do we need to have in stock? What parts do I need? So that's really been information that we just didn't have previously. And it's helped us a lot in doing that. So like I said, it's real easy to say buy a ton of everything, but that's not a good use of capital. It's or space at all. And this has given us the tools to make informed decisions.
Yeah, and then I think in Business Central, I guess there's probably, it's a combination of three things, right, that you're doing. One is you have this data sitting in Business Central, right? That's there. Sales, consumption, all these inventory ledger entries sitting there, combined with a few custom reports or processes to go recalculate lead times and do a couple things for you, and then Power BI or other reports, right, to kind of now view that data and analyze it.
Yes.
Right?
So that's one of the things that I really can't stress enough, is that the value of the data that's in there, but data is only valuable if you're looking at it. So one of the things, we've done is we've added in data analysts to the group, that their job is to just extract this data and give it to the people, and so that it can be audited, looking at that, using Power BI, using Jet reports, using just some of the inherent reports to Nav or Business Central. I'm sorry. The name,
not the first time.
Yeah,
do it every day.
So it's really what, there's a value to that data, but it's only valuable if you're actually looking at the data. So I think getting, as a director of, Management Information Systems, my job is to manage the distribution of information. And it's not just all that I can keep the computers running, and that it's information, whether it's, how that information is being transferred to people. So whether it's via computer, whether it's via, paper document, I just need to get information into your hands, and it needs to be good. So really, that's what, I view my function as, is being the caretaker of that information and delivering it to people in an effective way. So having those business analysts, and people doing those reports, getting it to those people that can audit that is very valuable to any company. And I think that's something that may get overlooked at times. I mean, you're looking at the ERP as this, it's supposed to, do everything, provide world peace and everything. It just, you need to work with it.
Yeah.
It needs
Somebody's
to be,
gonna run it.
It's a tool
yeah,
that you either know how to use or you don't know how to use. Right?
Exactly.
Like I could have a hammer in my hand and I could either build a house or I could smash myself in the toe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Now, you guys mentioned you're using Power BI. Do you like it?
we love it a lot. I mean, it's very familiar to a lot of people. And I think that's just one of the great things about Microsoft in general, is the familiarity of their products. I love when I hear this statement, Power BI just looks like an Excel, looks like an Excel pivot table. Great. I am glad you think that, because now I know you're going to use it because you're familiar with it. You're not intimidated by it.
The beauty of Microsoft products,
Yeah.
they kind of look alike.
I prefer Jet reports. I think I can do a little bit more with it, but it's a little more intimidating for people to go into that. But Power BI, a lot of My end users really respond well to it. It's very graphically, appealing, and
Yeah,
it's a high level overview. It's what I need right now.
exactly. High level overview, some keywords. I love it. I don't think we've mentioned whether or not you're using, do you got more to talk about the manufacturing and jobs
No,
or
there's,
supply chain or anything? So I don't think we've mentioned whether you're using on-premise or cloud software over there at Triangle.
So I am using on-prem and a private cloud. So sort of a hybrid.
Hybrid,
Yeah. And well, there's a reason for it.
just to clarify, right? Business Central on premise.
Yes.
Meaning
Hosted.
you're hosting it yourself
Yeah.
and you have full control over the environment, everything.
Yes.
It happens to be on a private cloud, yeah.
Yes. So the reason for that is, well, there's a lot of reasons for it. So one of the things I'd mentioned is I came into a company that we really were coming out of a system that was not a true ERP system. And if you want to know more about that, go to my original podcast and you can hear all kinds of great stuff about it. But the idea was the scalability of it. I like the idea of going into a infrastructure as a service type of an environment where I can scale it as I need it. And that's what I do love about infrastructure as a service is it's scalable. The reason I didn't use the Azure model at the time was I used a previous iteration of it with SaaS Plaza with Microsoft. Wasn't exactly my favorite flavor of it. And the reason for that was it didn't allow for as much customization as I was going to need. Now, that being said, I really don't want to heavily customize a very good system. Nav slash BC is a very good system. It's using a lot of industry standard practices. The problem is you're coming into, as I mentioned, at the time, 90-something-year-old company, at the time, I think 93-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing it this way. So trying to just basically shoehorn everything that they've been doing for 93 years into this very rigid format is just not going to work. I mean, and that's a recipe for failure, is to just completely change everything that everybody's doing and just stop dead. Now this is the new way we're going to do it. And I think that's why a lot of sometimes ERP implementations fail. You're not considering that change management. So going into a hosted environment seemed very rigid to me, whereas I can move into, if I were to have an on-premise license, I can customize it. And while I may not have agreed with all the customizations, I knew that they were stopgap solutions to assist us in getting everybody into the system. Okay, now that I got you acclimated into Business Central and Nav and you're understanding it. Okay, so now let's start pulling that out and let's start to get us into more of the business standard way of doing things. And 5 years into this implementation, I was telling Ken earlier today, that we're going to be looking at doing another upgrade. And in that upgrade, we're going to be looking at potentially going with more of a hosted solution or going with more what I would call standard out of the box Business Central, because we've come a long way. If you look at it like this, it's like, you showed a caveman fire, then all of a sudden you're showing them a light bulb. That's a big jump. I mean, Business Central was fire to us. That was something very scary and new, and it's a great tool and it lights things up. But yeah, that's scary to look at. And I think now we're at the point where it's like, okay, I want LED lights everywhere. And I think that's what this latest evolution for us is. So I see the value of both on-prem and the hosted model. I see both. I love cloud in general. Like I said, we're using a private cloud, which is just us hosting with another company. It's not actually an on-premise server. It's our license, but hosted someplace else. But down the road, could I see us getting into a SaaS model? Of course, I see that as a natural evolution of what we're doing. I think that's what a goal of ours should be, is to start operating as a with the standard form of Nav or Business Central. And one of the funny things I would tell people is when we were doing the implementation and they would fight me really hard on it, why doesn't the system do this? And I would look at them and go, Microsoft's a pretty big company. They've been around for a couple of days now. If they're looking at their ERP system and they're not doing it, should we be doing it?
Yeah.
Like
Makes
are we really smarter than, and it's sort of a humbling moment that you have to bring people to that. And it's like, we don't know as much as we think we know, just because we did it this way and we quote unquote worked, doesn't mean it's right.
Correct. Yeah.
So, but I think also if you want to make an ERP implementation fail, I think change everybody's world the minute you put something like this in. So I think you have to do it as a staged approach. And I had told everybody when we first brought Business Central in that I want it to be sort of a non-event when we do phase one. I want to replicate, what we're doing in our current system. I want to definitely get rid of a lot of the bad things, but I don't want to change your whole world. I need you to get used to these new screens. I need you to understand it. And I need you to understand the system.
Right.
Phase two is when we're going to actually start to realize the benefit of this system. And I think, Ken, you've probably you probably hear from me a lot less than you hear from my end users now. Like, I think they're calling you up with more questions and they're calling you up with more modifications and
Yeah,
requests of the system.
yeah, not even necessarily modifications, but they were crawling and now they're walking and they want to run.
Right.
So it's like, hey, I want to start running now. How do I do this? And I would use the example of job. Let's go back to jobs, which we were talking about, right? When we initially deployed it, the job structure, meaning the number of tasks that were there, or the planning lines that were created, were relatively simple.
Right.
Let's just do a bulk entry for the total amount of engineering. Well, now it's like, how can we do a better job of tracking the actuals versus the budget? We want to break that down with, electrical versus mechanical engineering and budget those separately. How do we do that? Well, we build more tasks.
Right.
And we budget now at that level and we start tracking that level of information. So it's not always customization. It's, hey, how can we change our setup, or what can we do to improve the use of this module?
And goes back to the point of the value of the data. So now you start looking at that data and you started saying, well, wait a minute now. Something that I didn't think was valuable, now it's missing things. I need more data out of it. So now you've actually just increased the value of what I'm able to capture. Now they're asking you for, okay, can we, how do I capture this? When I think customizations, it's not so much changing the way it's doing things. It's, can I add this field in because I want to be able to get this data out of there now, and I want to start tracking this. One of the things I just spoke to Simeon about today was I need to add a date stamp or a timestamp. And right now I'm only getting date stamps on certain transactions. I need timestamps with it as well. So, these are things that it's like, okay, we have it. We didn't even know we needed it. Now we're using it. It's like, wait a minute, this is great. I need more.
Taking it to that next level.
And that's what I love. And the other part that I love is, and what I was going to is that you're hearing from, the users, which is really what is the most important to me, is because I want to be the caretaker of the system. And I mentioned that as, my job is I'm the caretaker of the information, caretaker of the system. And that's really where my function is. But the users need to own it. The fact that they're calling you up, the fact that they're trying to evolve it and get more data out of it, that's really where the win comes in for me, is that they're owning this. They feel a ownership of the system. And that's what's going to move this whole thing forward, is them owning it. Because if it's an IT solution, I'm going to be very rigid about it, and it's going to be very logical.
Yeah.
And it's an illogical world.
Curious to know, excuse me, you said you're a lover of cloud, and as the caretaker of the system, would eventually moving to a SaaS-based model scare you from like a security standpoint, or no? Because I guess you don't have as much control.
You don't have as much control, but I think there's, things that you can put in place. Well, first off, I look at it like this. I do as much as I can to prevent it. And, if someone's really gonna like do an organized attack, they can get into, every one of them has been hacked, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Sony, they've been hacked. They have more money than I do, but they also have people that are sitting there 24/7, and there's teams of people watching it. So there's a more concerted effort to get into them. We, have put a lot of money into our security. So, do I think that I'm any more protected by not being? No, I'm not under that delusion that if I put it, I mean, that's like saying that my money's safer in a mattress,
Right, right.
in a shoebox under my mattress than it is in a bank. Well, okay, I guess, but it's not a realistic way of looking at it. I mean, I think that's the difference is, to me, that's keeping it on premises, that's shoebox in the under the mattress. So, I mean, I'm hoping that most of the people that are listening to this have a bank account.
I would imagine so.
Then there we go. So it's a very similar concept.
Our target market's got it.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And that's how I view SaaS versus, on-prem.
Right.
But, once again, you have to crawl before you walk. And I think it's just introducing that into our environment more slowly and getting us into a more standard operating, environment, and getting us out of our bad habits. And, I love that our leadership has a very defined plan of using Business Central in its standard format. How I hear this comment all the time, and it makes me smile when I hear this, is what does out of the box Business Central work like? I'm glad you asked that. Let's get there. And I think that's really where we want to be as a company. And I think, it's an evolution to get there. So I think that starting off as a on-prem is definitely, that crawling stage. I think, running marathons is when we get into a fully hosted SaaS model.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your insights with the listeners.
We definitely appreciate it. Thanks for teaching us a little bit more about wine than what we knew.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I love it.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully we'll be back next year for the
Cheers.
holiday edition.
All right.
Definitely. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about scalability with Business Central. Is it really for big businesses? So stick around.
All right. For our feature segment today, we're actually going to be talking about the Business Central online service that Microsoft hosts, right? That hosts the Business Central environments out there. And specifically, we're going to be talking about, answering the question, can a big business use Business Central? And I'm glad Gio is here with us today to, maybe contribute to this segment, because we're going to get into some technical weeds as we get into some of these numbers here. But I think our goal, and I'm going to let Michael dive into some of the details here in a minute, but I think our goal for this session is going to be to define, who is Business Central for? And when they say small business or mid-sized business or large business, what are they referring to? And then also talk about how does Microsoft scale Business Central for the larger organizations that are running on the service.
Right. So basically, since Business Central was released, there's always been questions of whether or not it can handle or work for a big business. And as we talked about before, I kind of hate when people bring this up because, what are the rules for a big business or a small business, right? So if I ask you, Jim, what would you say revenue-wise is a medium-sized business?
I think anything under 500 million is probably a medium-sized business.
All right. And Ken, what would you say?
It could be anywhere. Someone could say 50 million to $1 billion, or you could say 500 million to 2 billion.
Right. Now, to me, 500 million is a big business. So to me, it's a large business. That's why I hate this question, because it's relative to the person.
Right.
It's all semantics. Why are we even talking about it like that way? And I think Microsoft might have that same sort of set of mind or mind frame or whatnot, because do they have a definition of what a big business is right now? Microsoft actually does not specify exactly what a big business is, because when you think about it, there's so many things, right? Number of orders, revenue, how many lines on a sales order, how many people work for your company. there could be so many different things that define what a big business is that Microsoft doesn't define it. What really matters to Microsoft is how many resources you're using.
Mhm.
That's all that matters. So if you're a 2-person shop using the same amount of resources as somebody who's a 500-person shop, you're just as big as they are in Microsoft's eyes. Question?
Well, no, I think from my point of view as a purchaser of an ERP system, I would look at it as more the complexity of the business, not the revenue of it. So I would look at, so how many entities do I have underneath me? Am I building it in this entity and then selling it to this entity? And am I my own supplier on things? It's that complexity that I think really defines what's your small to medium business versus your enterprise business. Because really, I mean, revenue is definitely part of this, but I think that's really where your ERP system is going to, I think NAV can work, several $1 billion. I think NAV or Business Central is going to operate just perfectly. But I think once you start getting into those more intricate business structures, I think that's really what's going to define your small to medium business versus your large business. But
right,
that would change my opinion of what programs I looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So Microsoft looks at it more so from a data standpoint.
Yep.
Right. So have they defined any numbers or benchmarks that says
So
here's what Business Central we think can handle without issue?
Well, so they haven't defined exactly what a big business is with numbers. What they're saying is, if your business hits any of these numbers, these markers that we're going to talk about here in a second, then you really need to have your partner do a little bit more testing to make sure that your business is going to work smoothly with Business Central. And some of these numbers are, first, the amount of records in the table, 1,000 user table records, 800,000 sales invoice header tables, 3,500,000 item ledger entry tables, or 17 million GL entry tables. Now, they're not saying if you hit these markers, you're considered a big business. I want to reiterate that.
Right.
They mean just test and make sure that everything runs smoothly if you hit these
They're just
numbers.
saying if you have less than 1,000 users, 3.5 million item transactions and 17 million GL entries and whatever, then you should be good for the most part.
Right, exactly. That's the first part. So second would be the amount of data that is used. If your company is using 400 gigabytes or more, or 160 gigabytes migrated from an on-premise environment to the cloud using the migration tool, once again, let your partner do some testing.
Yeah. Okay.
Third, this one's kind of interesting, browser interactions. So these are things like maybe opening a page, closing a page, opening a new tab, whatever you're doing within your actual web browser. If your organization is doing 23 per second or 385,000 in one day, you might be considered a large business, right, in Microsoft's eyes.
Yeah.
Which seems like a lot to me, but if you got
23 per second across an entire day, right?
That seems harder to do than 385,000 in a day, right? I mean, if you got
I haven't done the math. Is that one and the same?
Pretty much, I guess. It probably is, yeah. Fourth would be web service calls such as API, SOAP, and OData. So 5,700 in 1 minute or 2,700,000 in 1 day. Lastly, transactions. 6,000 sales orders posted in 1 day or 3,300 lines on one sales order. Seems like a real
those are
lot,
those
right?
are relatively large numbers, right?
Yeah.
Now, to your point earlier, right? It depends what you're selling on those sales orders, right? I mean, you could be $1 billion company who's selling, let's say, a primary ingredient in a pharmaceutical product,
Right.
where a one-line sales order is $500,000.
Yeah.
Right, for one container
Right.
of
So it's
an
gonna
active
be-
ingredient.
It's gonna have a lot
Right.
on it, right?
Or you're a distributor selling widgets and you've got, customers ordering hundreds of orders a day with dozens of lines on each
Mhm.
order, right? Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
Right, and also what Microsoft is saying is that Business Central should be able to handle these numbers, or they've tested it, it does handle these numbers, but they just want you to make sure, so.
Yeah, so we've got customers I know that we support where they're I would say they clearly fall in the small business category in terms of these numbers with maybe just a dozen orders a day or whatever, right? But certainly we also have customers that are in the hundreds of orders a day, right? So how does Microsoft handle that sizing, and how do they monitor that and
So-
change the configuration?
Yes, they monitor it, and this is where things might get a little bit complicated. So, when you sign up for Business Central online, an Azure database is created right from the start. And then within this Azure database, they also create what is called an intelligent load balancer and a compute tier. And inside this compute tier, it includes a cluster of 5 virtual machines. Okay, so a little complicated. I can't really draw out designs or diagrams right now because you're listening, but
Sounds pretty impressive so far.
yeah. So the key to all this though really is the intelligent load balancer, right? That's what really keeps everything running smoothly in your business. And what the intelligent load balancer does, it says that let's say you have Office 365 and you have Power BI running on one virtual machine, and your virtual machine is at like 60% capacity. The intelligent load balancer is there, so when somebody logs into Business Central, it realizes we're not going to put you in virtual machine 1 because it's going to go over the capacity load. We're going to move you into virtual machine 2. Now, the normal person should really not notice this when it happens, but it's possible. I mean, I think Microsoft did a study, and what happens is that 3 to 4 minutes every week, this happens, but people don't notice it. So it's going to happen for 3 or 4 minutes per week. They're not going to know it.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here to talk about.
So it adds, so now I'm using 2 different virtual servers to handle that load.
Yeah,
and I've got up to 5.
Well, you got up to 5, right? That's what it comes with, but you can have as many as you need. If your resources cover all 5, the intelligent load balancer will create 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
It just
however many it
continues
is.
adding resources.
It does. So what else happens then though is, let's say you have a global company, right? And all these people are online in Europe, and it's going to be 8:30 in the morning here, and you're going to have 300 more people sign on to Business Central. Okay, so that influx of people at that point might create a strain on your actual overall Azure database. So what happens then is Microsoft monitors your Azure database and increases the size of the Azure database to allow for the compute tier and everything to work within the actual database to work smoothly. It's really I guess really technical and hard to explain over.
So I think, but to put it into more simplistic terms, what I'm hearing is there's not a person sitting at Microsoft who's responsible for monitoring your company's use of Business Central online and redivvying up resources accordingly. That this is all happening in an automated fashion.
Yes, completely automated
by the cloud.
Right. I think a misconception people used to have was, when Business Central first started, we think that we're in a cluster with 30 other organizations only, and when something happens, us and those 30 organizations are slowing down or whatnot. It's not like that. Your cluster is actually your 5 virtual machines, and that's what your cluster is. So I guess bottom line is, right, that you don't have to worry about whether or not Business Central is able to handle a big business. From the numbers and what Microsoft is doing, it should not be a problem whatsoever.
Yeah, I think those. I was impressed to see those numbers though, even that you shared, right? Yes. Like if you have over, I think you said it was like 1,000. If you're under these numbers, you should be good. Which was 1,000 users, 800 or 1 million invoices, 3 million inventory, right? Whatever those numbers were, those are. Right, published numbers that at least gives people a frame of reference. So we're not just saying, oh, are you big or are you medium size or large? It actually, there's a frame of reference to it.
Now, with maybe potentially moving to the cloud, Jim, is that something you worried about? Like speed, can Microsoft, internet uptime or whatnot?
Honestly, no. I mean, I would be more concerned with my bandwidth than I would be with their bandwidth. And that would be the bigger area that I would want to focus our attention on is it's Microsoft. I mean, they have multiple data centers,
Yeah.
all over the,
Worldwide.
when I'm saying multiple, I mean, they've got more than
Yeah.
two. I mean,
It's global.
they probably have two in the, in the zip code.
Yes.
So, I mean, honestly, their scalability isn't a concern of mine. It's mostly just the bandwidth. And I think really, I mean, we circle back to like the pandemic. I mean, the amount of at-home users and the amount of people coming in via a cloud-esque type of environment is really, gone through the roof. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, all these people at home, for lack of a better term, they're cloud users at this point in time. They're with just a private cloud to their office. Same basic concept. So, I mean, I think Microsoft has a better infrastructure than I could ever build in.
Yeah.
So I think it's looking at it from that point of view. I think their uptime, their availability, their speed isn't going to be something that I would be worried about.
Yeah, it's funny because internet usage or the loss of internet is kind of on par in my mind with the loss of like your electricity.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen that much anymore, right? But it's possible it can happen.
So thankfully, there are plenty of backup resources that you can put in place. I mean, don't have everybody on one line, have multiple ways of getting out to the internet.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So yeah, so if you're looking for more information on this or just a review of some of these details, if you're listening in and you're like, wait, what were those numbers?
Yeah.
Right? Michael has posted a blog article
Mhm.
at solstice.com.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I also plan on making a more intuitive video, I guess, with some more graphics or whatnot to kind of make it simpler for people to understand. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know it can be hard just hearing it. It was for me at first until I actually dove into it. So
Right. Yep.
all right, with that, that's going to bring us down to the closing of Shot at Business Central and a beer. So what I want to say is, well, before I guess we get into that, with this being our last episode of the year, we obviously want to thank everybody for listening to us throughout the entire year and supporting us. Over the past year, I got some numbers here. Our followers have increased by 43%. Streams of our podcast have increased 21%. And we've actually added 7 more countries than last year, bringing our total being into 70 countries. So not bad for a pretty specific topic, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it just goes to show that there's a lot of passionate Business Central users out there. They've always said that even Microsoft, will tell you that the NAV, Navision, and now Business Central, the user community is one of the strongest.
Yeah.
And I think that those numbers that you just shared kind of reflect that.
We actually even have, I don't know how it calculates this, but 7 people where A Shot at Business Central and a Beer is their most listened to podcast. It is their favorite podcast.
Wow.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's
that kind of shocked me.
are we 3 of those people?
Sadly to say, I guess I'm not one. I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts.
Yeah, no, that's great. 70 countries and a lot more listeners, and that's great. And I hope that people are getting value out of this. As much fun as we're having putting it together.
Yeah, and we're thankful that Jim was able to join us again for a holiday podcast. So thank you very much. We're going to look forward to having you back next year.
It's a great holiday tradition. If we can get this to be a regular event, I'd love it.
Yeah, I agree. So happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yes.
Yeah, Happy New Year.